Chapter 36. Plans to kill Thanos. 23 days later. Steve stood in the bathroom, his hand hovering over the sink as he thought to himself. He stares at his razor, debating. His beard was fuller than he usually kept it, rough but comforting. Laila had always loved the beard, said it made him look more than just Captain America. Would she love me still if I shaved it off? Steve thought to himself, and he remembers when they first got together, officially. He didn't have the beard then. Steve sighs as he rubs his hand on his face, conflicted before noticing the mirror shaking, the sink vibrating. Something outside was rumbling. He knew something is coming. Steve, Natasha, Bruce, and Rhodes stepped outside, and they see a ship flying down to the ground with the help of Captain Marvel. Pepper is watching as well. Captain Marvel lands the ship, and Steve runs over to help Tony out of the ship. Couldn't save him, Tony mutters to himself as Steve helps him. Neither could I, Steve says as he puts Tony's arm around his shoulder and walks over to the others. Tony stops him and looks at him. Hang on, I lost the kid. Steve looks at him for a moment before replying, Tony, we lost. Tony hesitated for a moment, expecting the worst. He sees Pepper running over to them and sighs with relief. Oh, good. Oh my God, Pepper says before wrapping her arms around him as she breaks down in tears. Oh my God! Tony hugs her back and whispers, It's okay. Steve watches the interaction, wishing that he could do the same with Laila, but she's not there, thanks to the snap. She was 4 months pregnant when the snap took her. If she was here right now, she would tell me to breathe, to keep moving forward. For her, and for the babies. Steve thought to himself. Steve took Tony inside the Avengers compound, as Rocket and Nebula stay outside mourning. It's been 23 days since Thanos came to Earth, Rhodes explains. Steve looks at the hologram that shows off the people who has been snapped, but one image made him look away, the picture of Laila smiling. World governments are in pieces, are trying to take a census, and it looks like he did exactly what he said he was going to do. Thanos wiped out 50% of all living creatures, Natasha says, and she looks over to Steve and knows he's thinking about Laila again. Thor looks down, looking mad and sad at the same time. Tony thinks for a moment before looking over to Steve. Where is he now? Where? Steve sighs for a moment. We don't know. He just opened a portal and walked through. Tony sighs as well before looking over to Thor. What's wrong with him? Thor looks up to him as Rocket speaks up. Oh, he's pissed. He thinks he failed. Tony looks at Rocket for a moment with a little shock in his eyes as Rocket continue. Which, of course, he did. But there's a lot of that going around, ain't there? Steve looks down at that and Natasha walked over to help him, grounding him. Tony points at Rocket. Honestly, until this exact second, I thought you were a Build-A-Bear. Natasha does a little smirk as she knows Scarlet would have loved that. Rocket shrugs his shoulders. Maybe I am. Steve speaks up to distract himself. We've been hunting Thanos for 3 weeks now. Deep space scans and satellites, we got nothing. Tony, you fought him? Tony looks at him surprised. Who told you that? I didn't fight him. No, he wiped my face with a planet, while the Bleecker Street magician gave away the store. That's what happened. There was no fight, because he's not beatable. Steve looks down and nods. Okay. Did he give you any clues? Any coordinates? Anything? Tony sputters before looking at Rhodes. I saw this coming a few years back. I had a vision. I didn't want to believe it. Thought I was dreaming. Steve stands up and walks over to him. Tony, I'm going to need you to focus. Tony cuts in. And I needed you, as in past tense. That trumps what you need. It's too late, buddy. Sorry. Tony sniffs something. You know what I need? Tony stands, pushing things off the table with a clatter. Everyone winces at the noise. I need to shave, and I believe I remember telling all yous. Rhodes walks over to him. Tony! Both Rhodes and Tony speak over to each other as Tony starts to remove his IVs and looks over to Steve. What we needed was a suit of armor around the world. Remember that? Whether it impacted on our precious freedoms or not. That's what we needed, Tony tells everyone. Well, that didn't work out, did it? Steve questioned. Tony looked straight at him. I said we'd lose. You said, we'll do that together too. And guess what, Cap? We lost and you weren't there, but that's what we do, right? Our best work after the fact. We're the Avengers, not the Prevengers. Rhodes grabs Tony to sit him down. Okay, Tony looks at Rhodes. Right? Rhodes nods. You made your point. Just sit down, okay? Tony looks at Carol. Okay, no, here's my point. You know what? She's great, by the way. Rhodes tries to make Tony sit down. Tony, you're sick. Sit down. Natasha puts her hand on her head as she sighs. We need you, your new blood. Tony tells Carol, but stands in front of Steve. Bunch of tired old mules. I got nothing for you, Cap. I got no coordinates, no clues, no strategies, no options. Zero, zip, nada, no trust, liar. Steve looks affected by Tony's words. The old friends just gaze at each other. After a moment, Tony rips his arc reactor from his chest and shoves it into Steve's hand. Here, take this, Tony tells Steve. You find him, you put that on, you hide. Tony falls to the floor and everyone quickly gathers around. Tony! Steve yells as he reaches out. I'm fine! Let me. Tony falls into a heap, unconscious. Rhodes takes Tony to the bed and Pepper walks over to sit down next to Tony, and Rhodes walks over to the others. Bruce gave him a sedative. He's gonna probably be out for the rest of the day. Carol looks at everyone with her arms crossed. You guys take care of him, and I'll bring him Azorian elixir when I come back. Carol goes to leave, but Steve spoke out. Where are you going? Carol doesn't stop walking. To kill Thanos. Steve and Natasha looks at each other before looking back at Carol before walking over to her. Hey, Natasha calls out to her and Carol looks over at her. You know, we usually work as a team here, and between you and I, morale's a little fragile. Steve spoke up as Rhodes leaned against the wall. We realise up there is more your territory, but this is our fight too. You even know where he is? Rhodes asks. Carol looks at them. I know people who might. Nebula's voice cuts through. Don't bother. I can tell you where Thanos is. Everyone looks at her before gathering around the table again. Thanos spent a long time trying to perfect me, and when he worked, he talked about his great plan. Even disassembled, I wanted to please him. I'd ask, where would we go once his plan was complete? And his answer was always the same. Nebula continues as she walks over to the table and leaned on it. To the garden. Rhodes nods as his eyebrows rise for a moment. That's cute. Thanos has a retirement plan. Steve paces back and forth. So, where is he? Rocket starts a hologram of different planets. When Thanos snapped his fingers, Earth became ground zero for a power surge of ridiculously cosmic proportions. No one's ever seen anything like it. Until 2 days ago, Rocket shows another planet that isn't Earth. On this planet, Nebula nods as she looks over to everyone. Thanos is there. Natasha leaned on the table to check the planet. He used the stones again. Bruce calls out as he chuckles. Hey, hey, hey! We'd be going in short-handed, you know? Rhodes looks over to Bruce. Look, he's still got the stones, so... Carol cuts in. So, let's get 'em. Use them to bring everyone back. Bruce looks at her. Just like that? Steve nods. Yeah, just like that. Steve and Carol share a knowing look. Even if there's a small chance that we can undo this? I mean, we owe it to everyone who's not in this room to try, Natasha says, and she looks over at Steve. Steve goes quiet again as he knows Laila would have tried, and he uses that thought to make himself ready for it. Bruce looks at Natasha. If we do this, how do we know it's going to end any differently than it did before? Carol spoke out quickly. Because before you didn't have me. Everyone looks at her and Rhodes speaks up. Hey, new girl. Everyone in this room is about that superhero life. Carol shot him a look as he continues. And if you don't mind my asking, where the hell have you been all this time? Carol stares straight at him. There are a lot of other planets in the universe. And unfortunately, they didn't have you guys, well, expect for one, kind of... Steve looks at her for a moment and Thor stands up after eating and walks over to her and lifts his arm near her as rumbling sounds is heard. And Thor catches his Stormbreaker near Carol, who just smile at that. Thor nods as he says, I like this one. Steve allowed himself the faintest smile, not because of Carol, but because Laila would have liked her before breaking the tension. Let's go get this son of a bitch. Natasha, as everyone is on their way to Benatar, whispers to Steve, when Laila comes back, I'm going to tell her you swore again. Steve froze in place for half a second. His lips slowly curved into the faintest smile. He let the thought linger, holding on to it like a lifeline. Chapter 37. I went for the head. Inside the ship, everyone besides from Tony is there. Rocket looking out of the window before he speaks. Okay, who here haven't been to space? Rocket looks behind him at everyone. Steve, Natasha and Rhodes raises their hands. Why? Rhodes asks as Carol chuckles. Rocket look back as he answers. You better not throw up all over my ship. Approaching jump in 3, 2, 1, Nebula says as her voice is calm. Everyone grips the handle of their seats as the jump starts. Their eyes seize the stars flashing past them. Steve closes his eyes, and he thought about Laila smiling, talking to Natasha about baby names before opening them back up again and sees the planet that Thanos is on. Carol leaves the ship first and spoke over the comms. I'll head down for recon, before she flew to the planet. Everyone watches her before Natasha looks over to Steve and notices pain in his expression as he looks at the picture of Laila in his wallet. Natasha makes a little smile before looking at Steve again as her smile disappears. This is gonna work, Steve. I know it will, Steve tells Natasha before looking over to her, 'cause I don't know what I'm gonna do if it doesn't. Carol flies back to everyone. No satellites, no ships, no armies, no ground defences of any kind. Bruce looks confused, and Thor looks determined. It's just him, Carol said flatly. Nebula looks at Carol with Rhodes next to her. And that's enough. Time skip. A scenic, lush, tropical fauna. A scarecrow made of Thanos' armour is seen before we cut to a shot focusing on the burnt Infinity Gauntlet on Thanos. 2018. Arm. He's walking among his crops, harvesting fruit and putting them in a sack. He walks over to the shed with a dragging quality to his legs, like it pains him to walk, presumably his living quarters, and tries to sit down, and we see his full face. His whole left side is burnt black with blisters. He looks ridiculously pathetic compared to when we saw him last. Suddenly, Carol Danvers flies through the roof, knocking Thanos down and grabbing his neck. Bruce, in the Hulkbuster armor, bursts from the ground and grabs Thanos' 2018 Infinity Gauntlet arm. Rhodey flew in next and grabbed his other arm, holding it back. Thor flies in and slices off the Infinity Gauntlet. Steve walks in his Winter Soldier outfit, with Natasha right behind him, staring murderously at Thanos, 2018. Rocket goes over to the sliced-off Infinity Gauntlet and rolls it over, as everyone realizes that there are no stones in it. Rocket looks up. Oh, no. Steve and Natasha look at each other before they look at Thanos, 2018. Where are they? Steve asked, his voice calm but cold. Carol tightened her hold on Thanos, 2018's neck. Answer the question. Thanos, 2018 groaned. The universe required correction. After that, the stones served no purpose. Beyond temptation. You murdered trillions! Bruce yells as he pushes Thanos. Thanos looks straight at Bruce. You should be grateful. Bruce punches him across the face, and Natasha slowly walks over. Where are the stone? Natasha asks, her voice sharp and trembling. Thanos looks at Natasha. Gone, reduced to atoms. You used them 2 days ago, Bruce yells, confused. Thanos slowly gets up. I used the stones to destroy the stones. The words hung there. Steve's world tilted, his chest tightened, his breath caught in his throat. In his mind, a flash of Laila's face smiling after she teased him with, incredibly hot guy with blonde hair. Thanos looks at them. It nearly killed me, but the work is done. It always will be. I am inevitable. Rhodes looks at everyone. We have to tear this place apart. He has to be lying. Nebula's voice cuts through the noise. My father is many things. A liar is not one of them. Thanos looks over to Nebula. Ah, thank you, daughter. Nebula starts to feel uncomfortable and looks down, and Steve walks over to her and puts his hand on her shoulder, knowing it's the same thing Laila would have done. Perhaps I treated you too harshly. Thanos finishes before Thor uses his Stormbreaker and cuts off Thanos' head. Nebula wipes off some of the blood spatter. Bruce looks at Body. What? Rocket looks over to Thor. What did you do? Thor looks broken, realizing what he's done. I went for the head. Thor leaves while everyone stayed. Steve mutters quietly to himself. Laila? I'm sorry that I failed. Chapter 38. Hope isn't lost. 5 years later, therapy session. It cuts to an abandoned cafe with a poster on the wall labelled, Where do we go now that they're gone? A therapy session is taking place with Steve Rogers and 7 other people. So, I went on a date the other day, Joe explains to the group. It's the first time in 5 years. You know, I'm sitting there at dinner. I didn't even know what to talk about. What did you talk about? Steve asks after he makes a little smile and a little nod. Steve's mind told him, she would have loved this kind honestly. Same old crap. You know how things have changed. My job, his job, how much we miss the Mets. Joe replies as he thinks to himself before finishing off. And then things got quiet. Then he cried as they were serving the salads. Jim spoke up to ask, What about you? I cried just before dessert. Joe answers, But I'm seeing him again tomorrow, so... Steve nods as he does a little smile. That's great. You did the hardest part. You took the jump. You didn't know where you were going to come down. Steve looks at the others as he continues. And that's it. That's those little brave baby steps we got to take to try and become whole again. Try and find a purpose. He thought to himself for a moment, thinking about the past after he'd gotten the serum before speaking again. I went in the ice in 45, right after I met the love of my life. She was a nurse. I accidentally shot her down thinking she was Hydra after she escaped. Woke up 65 years later. She did the same thing. He stops talking for a second, thinking about the guilt and the relief he felt seeing her again before continuing. You gotta move on. Gotta move on. The world is in our hands. It's left to us, guys, and we gotta do something with it otherwise. Thanos should have killed all of us. Another skip. San Francisco. Inside the U-Store storage. A rat crawls over the van's rear windshield and accidentally activates the controls for opening the quantum realm, haphazardly activating the quantum tunnel. The rear door busts open, flinging Lang outside the van. Scott groans and grunts as he removes the cushion off his body and deactivates the helmet, but still grunting in pain as he sweeps away sparks from an electrical failure out of his suit, then tried to stand up. What the hell? Scott gets up as he looks around confused. Hope? Inside a security office, a security guard reading a book as he looks upon his security screen, seeing something going on in one of the storage facilities. In the cameras, it shows Lang in his casual clothing, shouting, waving a sign with the word "help" written on it. Outside the facility, he pulls out a pushcart and looks back, seeing the guard giving a stern look from far. He walks around until he reaches his hometown, finding a post filled with missing posters, abandoned houses, a wrecked car, nothing but desolation. He then sees a kid in a bike passing by. Kid? Hey, kid! Scott yells at the kid, and the kid stops and looks over to him. Scott looks at the kid confused. What the hell happened here? The kid looks like he's about to cry, but looks away to bike away, which made Scott look more confused before he goes to the memorial. Scott looks at the engraved stones before muttering, "Oh my God!" before he starts to look for Hope's and Cassie's name. "Oh, please! Please, please! No, no, no! Number! Excuse me, sorry. No, Cassie, no!" Scott finds a space where his name is, and he looks confused. What? Before he notices another name that he recognised. Laila Jenkins. Scott stops short, staring at it. Oh. No, he whispered. His mind flashed to Steve, to Natasha, to the way Steve had once spoken about her with such quiet devotion. She was pregnant, he remembered dimly. His stomach turned. Steve! He muttered to himself as he started running again. Time skip. Avengers facility. Natasha is making herself some peanut butter sandwich as Rocket speaks over the speakers. Yeah, we boarded that highly suspect warship Danvers pinged. Natasha lost focus for a moment as she thought about Layla, but snaps back as everyone continues to talk. It was an infectious garbage scowl, Nebula told everyone. Rocket looks over to the hologram Carol. So, thanks for the hot tip. Carol looks over to hologram Rocket. Well, you were closer. Yeah, and now we smell like garbage, Rocket spat back. Natasha sat down as she looks at Okoye. You get a reading on those tremors? Okoye looks over to Natasha and shakes her head. 'Twas a mild subduction under the African plate. Do we have a visual? How are we handling it? Natasha asks. Okoye sighs. Nat, it's an earthquake under the ocean. We handle it by not handling it. Natasha nods slightly before shifting her focus on Carol. Carol, are we seeing you here next month? Not likely, Carol tells Natasha. What? You gonna get another haircut? Rocket asks as he looks at her. Carol looks at Rocket. Listen, fur face. I'm covering a lot of territory. The things that are happening on Earth are happening everywhere on thousands of planets. Rocket mumbles to himself. All right. That's a good point. That's a good point. Carol looks over at Natasha again. So, you might not see me for a long time. Natasha nods before replying. All right. Well, this channel's always active. So if anything goes sideways, anyone's making trouble where they shouldn't, comes through me. Okoye agrees in her language. Okay, Rocket says quietly. Natasha stands up straight. All right. One by one, Rocket, Okoye, Nebula turns off their holograms. Carol looks over to Rhodes's hologram. Good luck. And ends her hologram. Rhodes looks over to Natasha as Natasha sighs to herself before noticing him. Where are you? Natasha asks him. Mexico. The Federales found a room full of bodies. It looks like a bunch of cartel guys. Never even had the chance to get their guns off. Rhodes explains to Natasha as he has his arms crossed. It's probably a rival gang, Natasha tells him. Except it isn't. It's definitely Barton. Rhodes explains and Natasha does a small nod. What he's done here, what he's been doing for the last few years. I mean, the scene that he left. Natasha starts to show signs of sadness as she gradually tears up and Rhodes finishes off. I gotta tell you, there's a part of me that doesn't even want to find him. Natasha does a little nod. Will you find out where he's going next? She reaches over to grab her sandwich and eats it as she looks over to Rhodes. Nat, Rhodes tries to comfort her through the hologram. Please, Natasha asks him. Rhodes, feeling reluctant, nods and whispers, okay, before cutting off his hologram. Nat starts to cry as she tries to hold back her tears. She looks over to the small, battered baby name book with Layla's handwriting on it, saying, Nat, you have to help me pick names. Elle loves it. She touched the corner of the note with her fingertip. Still trying to be better, Layla, she thought to herself. Out loud, however, she muttered, We're still here, you stubborn woman. You know, I'd offer to cook you dinner, but you seem pretty miserable already. Natasha does a little smile as she slips the book into her drawer. You here to do your laundry? And to see a friend, Steve says with a little smile before walking over and sitting down across from Natasha. Natasha shrugs slightly. Clearly, your friend is fine. You know, I saw a pod of whales when I was coming over the bridge, Steve tells Nat. Nat looks shocked. In the Hudson? There's a fewer ships, cleaner water, Steve tells her. Natasha crosses her arms. You know, if you're about to tell me to look on the bright side, I'm about to hit you in the head with a peanut butter sandwich. Steve does a little chuckle. Sorry, force of habit. He thought for a moment and looks over to Nat. You know, I keep telling everybody they should move on and grow. Some do, but not us. Nat looks over to him again. If I move on, who does this? Steve crossed his arms. Maybe it doesn't need to be done. I used to have nothing, and then I got this job, this family, and I was better because of it. And even though they're gone, I'm still trying to be better. Nat told Steve, but adds on. Apart from someone, Layla made me feel like a sister. Steve makes a little smile. I think we both need to get a life. Natasha does a little smile, but it doesn't reach her eyes. You first. A device chimes and Nat swipes left to accept, and they see Scott outside. Oh, hi, is anyone home? This is Scott Lang. We met a few years ago at the airport, in Germany. I got really big and I had my mask on. You wouldn't recognize me, Scott yells through the camera. Steve stood up confused. Is this an old message? Natasha with a little hope in her eyes. It's the front gate. Chapter 39. 5 hours, 5 years. Time skip, Avengers compound. Scott paces back and forth, muttering to himself before he looks over to Steve and Natasha after rubbing his eyes. Steve looks at Scott. Scott? Scott looks over to him as he adds on, "Are you okay?" Scott nods as he breathes in and out. "Yeah. Have either of you guys ever studied quantum physics?" Natasha looks at Steve, then at Scott. "Only to make conversation." Scott points at Natasha, then stops. "All right, so 5 years ago, right before Thanos, I was in a place called the quantum realm. The quantum realm is like its own microscopic universe. To get in there, you have to be incredibly small. Hope, she was supposed to pull me out. And then Thanos happened, and I got stuck in there." Natasha's voice softens. "I'm sorry. That must have been a very long 5 years." Scott looks straight at her. "Yeah, but that's just it. It wasn't, for me, it was 5 hours. See, the rules of the quantum realm aren't like they are up here. Everything is unpredictable. Is that anyone's sandwich? I'm starving." Steve does look confused for a moment. "Scott, what are you talking about?" Scott looks over to them with his mouth full of the sandwich. "So, what I'm saying is, time works differently in the quantum realm. The only problem is, right now, we don't have a way to navigate it. But what if we did?" Steve and Natasha look at each other as Scott continues. "I can't stop thinking about it. What if we could somehow control the chaos, and we could navigate it? What if there was a way that we could enter the quantum realm at a certain point in time, but then exit the quantum realm at another point in time? Like before Thanos." "Wait, are you talking about a time machine?" Steve asks Scott, and Natasha looks thoughtful, and she looks over to Steve as she thought about how they can bring everyone back. No, of course not. No, not a time machine. This is more like a time machine," Scott stammers. "I know, it's crazy. It's crazy, but I can't stop thinking about it. There's got to be some way." Scott sighs to himself. "It's crazy." "Scott, I get emails from a raccoon, so nothing sounds crazy anymore." Natasha reassures Scott. "So, who do we talk about this?" Scott asks. Steve thought to himself and looks at Scott as he feels that same urge he had 5 years to get everyone back, including Layla and Bucky. "I know someone.